Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of On Brand from Muse by Clio. I'm Nicole Purcell, the president of the Clio Awards. And before I bring out Mr. Tim Nudd, my co-host, let's hear a word from our partners at Salesforce. Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Hi, Nicole. Doing well. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm excited for today's talk because it is a partner of ours at Clio Sports. So I'm very excited for that.
Totally. Yeah. Ed Romaine is the CMO at Bleacher Report. And there's so much to talk about. I mean, obviously, it's been such a fascinating time for the sports world. Leagues, teams have been in total disarray because of COVID, of course, although a lot of sports are back now. And, at the same time, athletes have really never had more power to have their voices heard. Just see what's happening in the NBA recently. So it's a really fascinating time. And, Bleacher Report's also a partner of ours in the Clio Sports Awards this year. So let's say hi to Ed Romaine.
Hey,
Hi,
Ed.
guys. Thanks so much for having me. Good afternoon.
Welcome. We're going to say a quick cheers to you to start off.
Cheers.
And where is your wine
Monday.
from?
My wine is from France. It's a Côte de Provence. It's called. I already forgot the name.
That's okay. Just keep drinking.
I'll tell you at some point. Yeah, exactly.
Later.
It's dry. It's nice and dry.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to start and ask everyone, obviously working from home, a little crazy. Where are you? Who are you living with? And how is it going for you?
So I am in Harlem, in New York City, with my husband. We have been here. He works at Google, and I obviously work at Warner Media, but we have been in the house since March. And it's been honestly really good. We moved right before the pandemic started, to a bigger apartment. So we've had the fortune of having separate places to work. So it hasn't been so bad.
So have you not gone out for dinners or lunches to restaurants yet, or have you done that?
I think I've been outside twice to a food establishment since the city started reopening. We've been pretty good. We've done, we went out east for a couple weeks with family.
Okay, great.
And we're going to Massachusetts tomorrow, but we've tried to be pretty diligent about, I am going for jogs around the park and stuff like that, but haven't done much socializing, a lot of home cooking.
Oh, very nice. Well, How is it working with your team during this time? How's the communication? Are you Zoom fatigued? Like, how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I have Zoom fatigue. And I think with certain colleagues over others that are more comfortable with phone and also that I know have Zoom fatigue, we've agreed to sort of take our meetings via phone. I think it's going as well as it can, right? Because fortunately, at least, I'd worked with these people for 2.5 years before we were working from home. So our relationships are still strong. I think the difference is, as creatives, it's hard to recapture the same energy as we're chatting with each other now than it would be if we were in person with one another, just sort of building on energy and all of those factors. I think those are the things that get lost.
Yeah,
totally. Ed, I would love to jump in and just ask you about sort of the early conversations that you guys had during COVID as a company. Obviously, the global suspension of sports must have been a pretty big, punch for you guys in terms of editorial model, business model, all that stuff. So what was your early conversations about sort of how to deal with this crisis? And then how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, the pause certainly was something that has never happened before in history and something that we definitely weren't anticipating from a business perspective. I remember even in the days leading up to working from home, I had a cold and I was about to come back to the office and my boss at the time had said, you need a doctor's note to come back. And I said, what? Like, what are you talking about? And then I sort of understood how the gravity was taking place. And then within days, everything started to sort of domino effect and shut down or be at least delayed. I think the fortunate part for Bleacher Report is that we've always tried to foster a community dialogue and create content that is centered around generating engagement. So in some ways, our calculus didn't have to change entirely. A lot of the content that we were manifesting or distributing was user generated in nature. I think what we started to do once we understood that the sort of fear and panic of those first few weeks were going to subside and people were going to turn to social and digital platforms for solace. I think what we did was we decided to over-index on UGC, think about how people were feeling in the sort of new normal, athletes and consumers alike, fans alike, and manifest that on our platforms. And it happened to work really well. And we were fortunate. And I would say in candidness, I don't think we knew that it was going to work as well as it did, but we just tried to be intuitive with where we thought our users were going and how they were feeling.
Okay.
So we know you brought in a new creative director, Mr. Dwyane Wade, which I think is really cool. Why him? How do you guys work together? Give us a little backstory on that.
Yeah, so I would be lying if I said I wasn't super excited to be working with Dwyane Wade. I think the great part about Dwyane is not only is he just such a storied, amazing player with such a legacy, but the other great part about him is that he has so many ancillary interests outside of the game that really sit perfectly at the nucleus of what Bleacher Report is about, which is sort of the culture that surrounds the game, be it music or fashion or art or any of those sort of counter passion points that fans interact with. And I think even if you think about sports and how it's democratized over time in the same way that the art, music, and fashion worlds have, there's such a blended sort of experience, whether you're a casual fan or a hyper connected fan. And I think Dwyane, sort of strikes that balance for us at being the icon that he is from a cultural perspective, and then having all those other interests that sort of are synchronous with who Bleacher Report is.
We actually have the video essay that you guys created together, so we're going to show it really quick, but would love to hear how you worked together on that and how it came about.
Okay.
Wins and losses. They say that's the measure of an athlete.
First championship in franchise history.
But we can't separate the athlete from the human.
He's receiving heavy booze.
We never could.
I look at the African American being oppressed in this country, and I don't stand for that.
The most important factor is respect, period.
Black athletes are celebrated on the court, but feared off of it.
An NBA player tased by police.
Taser.
Their talent is worth millions, but their voice is deemed worthless. But athletes have always and will always fight for victory.
We will definitely not shut up and dribble.
Not just in basketball.
We will be a voice for the voiceless.
But for the culture.
Maya Moore stepping away from basketball to fight for justice.
So we owe it to the game and to the people to share the whole story, from court to concrete.
Being an NBA player don't exclude me from no conversation.
Because this is bigger than basketball. It has to stop.
I want real change in America.
Breonna Taylor, rest in peace.
Can't separate peace from freedom.
Freedom and justice for all.
I am somebody. I am somebody. I am somebody.
Wow, we owe it to the game. Just congratulations, such an amazing piece.
Thank you for showing that, by the way. I appreciate it.
So great.
So I can just share, I think one of the great things about Dwyane is that he's never been afraid to speak out on societal issues that are important to him, whether it's homophobia, whether it's social justice. One of the critical things for us as a brand has been how to establish our place in the conversation in a way that's authentic to who we are, and also commit with authenticity to not only our fans, but also internally at the company, that social justice will continue to be important for us, not just in this moment, but moving forward. I think one of the most compelling parts about this time in history is that the walls between our professional lives and our sort of political and societal lives are all converging on each other. And part of what magnifies that is us being home, right? Every emotion that we have is intensified because we're looking at each other through a computer camera. And so it becomes certainly heightened, but way more important for us to proactively go out and say, this is what we stand for. This is how we're going to commit to that stance. And Dwyane helped us sort of materialize that from an artistic and aesthetic point of view. And we worked with him really from the ground up. We said to him, we want to have a voice in this. We know that this season is about more than basketball. Can you help us tell this story in a credible way? And I think he did an unparalleled job at it.
Yeah, did you guys produce that in-house, or did you work with someone on that?
We did. So we have a creative studio in-house called Playmaker. Playmaker in many ways serves as the creative agency inside Bleacher Report for the ad marketplace. But in many instances with things like this, when we're creating brand assets, they also help us produce it because there's a team of writers, producers, and directors that sit on that team. And I have to give tremendous amount of credit to the female executives on Playmaker who helped us formulate that script, which I thought was really powerful.
Yeah. Ed, you mentioned that Bleacher Report's very much devoted to the sports off the court and off the field. And do you feel like you guys are really well positioned to sort of now that conversations involving athletes are so central to the American debate about racial equality? I mean, you guys must feel fairly good about sort of having being in a position to sort of have a take on this that's credible, maybe more so than some of your competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly in a position to facilitate conversation. One of the early examples that I can point to is Taylor Rooks talking to DeMar DeRozan about what it means to be Black inside the NBA. I think that was one of the first conversations we had after the racial pandemic sort of took hold. I think like any other organization, we're at the beginning of a long line of work that needs to be done. But I think what encourages me is that I feel a commitment, not just at Bleacher Report, but more broadly across Turner Sports and Warner Media to do the work, which is not only encouraging, but it gives a duality to purpose that we didn't have before and that we should have been endeavoring to sort of solve for before. And I don't say that as an excuse, but more, I'm happy that there's a sort of new cognizance around the work so that we can do it in earnest.
Okay. Sticking with the NBA for a minute, I know you guys have done an interesting partnership with Google recently inside the bubble. Can you, I guess maybe first of all, we could show a clip from a video that you did with Sabrina Ionescu. So Carly, let's just roll that and then we can chat about that one.
Looking forward to a lot of things, getting to New York, obviously playing and starting my professional career, but there's a lot of other things that I'm looking forward to, which is obviously the food spots and hopefully fall in love with some new sandwich shop in New York. Those are my hidden gems. Thank you, Bleacher Report and Google.
So, we'll talk a lot about your sponsorship work because I think it's quite unique. But tell us about this particular campaign, what it entailed, what the fans got out of it, and also what Google got out of it.
Sure. We're very grateful to Google, so I want to thank them for sure. I think the idea that we were both trying to perpetuate in this campaign was to really leverage the excitement about the return to sports, but some of the content around supporting small businesses and social justice around that was really to begin to tell stories at that sort of granular in-market level, right? I think everybody's experience with what's been going on over the last months is wide-ranging, and certainly some people have had more intense or more traumatic experiences than others over the last months. But I think what we wanted to do was talk about we really called it the food I miss, but it was about the local businesses and the things that were happening pre-pandemic that we were feeling nostalgic about. And we felt like Sabrina certainly and CJ McCollum could be two credible voices to sort of share with our users like what they were experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you feel like why would Google want to partner with you guys on that? What was the angle there for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the bubble is very technically advanced, right? It's all about connectivity. And actually one of the ways that they're able to ensure the health of all of the people inside the bubble leverages a lot of technology. Everyone's using an NBA owned app that they have to log into every morning to report their health. And I think this idea of immediacy and connectivity, especially when fans can't, outside of virtually sitting in the stands, can't see inside the bubble or feel a part of it, I think capitalizing on what that emotion felt like for some of the people there was something that we both felt was important to translate.
Sure.
Talking about a couple other brands that you've worked with, like Audi and Gap, you've done a lot of branded entertainment or content series. Can you tell us a little bit about them? But also, what is your difference compared to some of your competitors, like an ESPN, how you're focusing on branded content?
Yeah, so I'll be excited to share with you guys in the next 4 weeks or so. We did an interesting insight study on social engagement and how that leads to an elevated purchase intent. We're actually able to demonstrate that from a statistically significant standpoint. But I think I say all that to say, when we are creating branded content, the first thing that we're trying to do is make content that people want to watch. We always say branded content is only branded when it's bad. And so some of the stories that we try to tell with our sponsors are akin to the stories that our Voice or our editorial organization, that we call it Voice internally, but are similar to what they would create. So that if you're a fan, when you're coming inside the ecosystem, wherever you're happening to access the content on desktop or the app or on social, you're seeing content that would be entertaining, no matter if there's a sponsor associated with it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you work with Audi and Gap? Like, give us examples of how that worked.
Yeah, so in the case of Gap, I'll just use them as a quick example. They were going through a sort of reimagining of what their sense of style was going to be at the chain more broadly. And they wanted to think about style through a different prism, right? They'd always used models or Hollywood celebrities to sort of anchor their campaigns. And I think that they thought that sports over the last decade and a half or so had really become the new sort of beacon through which we look when we're thinking about style inspiration. Iman Shumpert obviously has a tremendous personality and represents a lot of sort of iconic fashion looks from a style perspective. He's married to Teyana Taylor, who was famously in the Kanye West video wearing next to nothing. I say all that to say they're both just like these super Renaissance, fashion forward, vocal celebrities. And I think Iman for them was someone that they thought could translate their new approach to style in a credible way that would get people excited. And it did tremendously well from a viewership perspective. All of that, though, I would say is because we created in a way, again, that doesn't feel like it's a commercial. It's sort of, we're telling a story with Gap at the forefront of that story. And they get to have the advantage of, you know, being able to translate that for the consumer, but the story itself is what's really exciting the person that's watching it.
Yeah, the Audi thing really I found pretty fascinating too. Before we came on, I was chatting with Nicole and Carly about the Sunderland Till I Die series on Netflix, and just the you know, the passion behind soccer, and it must be nice to be able to sort of tap into sort of existing passion in the communities that you can then activate for these brand partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Audi series actually chronicled, it was a 5-part video series, and it chronicled life in one of our biggest youth academies. I think soccer is so interesting for us because for so long we've talked about soccer taking hold in the United States, and like, how do we do that in the right way? I think early on we were able to generate success because we were using folks like Steve Nash, who was a decorated NBA star, to help us translate his passion for soccer, because he almost played professional soccer, for a fan that may not be typically associating with soccer. So that worked early on for us. I think now what we found is our users are responding to sort of that feeling of community, as I mentioned. And so anytime we can showcase individual communities, it helps people connect, especially now that we're apart, in a different way. And I think it's been, at least from an engagement perspective, it's been working tremendously well. I can tell you, like, and I know I've said engagement probably 1,000 times in the last 10 minutes.
It's supposed to take a drink every time you say it, by the way.
Oh, is that our safe word? Okay. But, you know, I think the fervor for sports to return was so intense that we saw our engagement numbers skyrocket when the NBA came back to pre-pandemic levels. They were superseding those numbers, and I think it was because people were so hungry for sports to return, and thankfully we were giving them content in the way that they wanted to receive it, so it worked. And I'll take a sip now.
You know, I actually wanted to ask you something else about engagement, which is
wait, hold on.
Yeah,
about engagement.
It's got to be a social. It's got to be a social thing if we're going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fans' lives have changed so much. I mean, how are you guys adjusting your approach to kind of meet them where they are in their new reality?
Yeah. So I think before sports started, what we were doing was sort of translating or communicating that the competition wasn't necessarily over, even though it was paused. So we did something called the at-home challenge, where we recruited celebrities to actually do a dunk into their garbage can at home. We were sort of just trying to continue to celebrate that spirit of athletic feat, or doing something unimaginable physically that someone shouldn't be able to do, whether it was, jumping as high as they could before a dunk or doing an amazing trick on a skateboard. I think now that sports are back, what we've been focused on really is some of the real conversations that are taking place inside the bubble. As you know, LeBron James is one example, is someone who every time post-game has been talking about these justice issues because he wants to make sure that they're using the time devoted to the media in as much of a way to generate momentum forward as possible. And we've been trying really hard to cover that credibly and with frequency.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of just your content in general, like I want to talk about Game of Zones, which is such an incredible, certainly one of the best content series around sports ever made.
I appreciate that.
Won a Grand Clio at Clio Sports in 2018.
Yep.
At that ceremony, actually, I had a chance to chat with Adam and Craig Malamuth, who created that show. Lovely guys, super talented. And I just wanted to sort of ask you, well, I guess we'll show a clip first, and then I got a couple questions for you.
You want to prove you're the GOAT? This is your chance.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's just Michael Jordan, right?
We must destroy that which stands in our way. The media, Dell.
Yeah. Don't show that kind of frustration in front of Sir Jordan. It's like blood in the water.
Wait, what?
Cut away all your distractions. Cut away self-doubt and insecurity. Once you have removed all that does not serve you in battle, you have found your Mamba form.
My fellow gods of tomorrow, we are the Dream Team's nightmare!
So, for the few people who may not know, it's a Game of Thrones NBA mashup, NBA storylines told through a Game of Thrones lens, which,
in case the clip didn't show that.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't get it.
Now, it ran for quite a few. I think it just wrapped up in
April,
did. After 6 or 7 or 8 seasons, maybe. Wondering how that sort of helped you guys build your brand and sort of how hard it is to produce something that high quality and that beloved by fans.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can't take any credit for Adam and Craig's work. I can't say enough about how amazing the show was, and certainly was a meaningful part of our portfolio. The way that they were able to replicate some of the storyline, like you saw there, which was actually inspired by the finale of Game of Thrones. And I always think back to, not to date myself, but when I was, let's call it a preteen, the Dream Team was sort of adorning my whole bedroom wall. Like that was, so the fact that they're able to bring in such amazing cultural references into every episode, and also I think capitalize on player personalities in a way that gently sort of pokes fun, but also almost celebrates each of the players, are some of the components that make the show so compelling. I would say early on, you have to remember Bleacher Report started as a user generated sort of box score blog, right? And even after we hired professional journalists, and even after we started to develop, hi, what's the puppy's name?
Milo.
Oh, hi, Milo. Even after we started to create other kinds of content, Game of Zones was one of the first shows that actually, to your point, celebrated basketball, but did it in a way that was through the lens of entertainment and obviously through animation. And we've replicated it a couple of times through Gridiron Heights or The Champions, football and soccer respectively. And they're not, I want to give the homage to Game of Zones as much as I can, but I think that format, as far as connecting with young people, has worked really well, and it's another way to consume sports without necessarily just looking at a recap from the night before.
Yeah,
it's shareable, it's snackable, it's all of that stuff.
It's amazing. It's so well done, and we're so excited that you guys, came on our stage 2 years ago.
My God,
we actually were able to have a stage.
Yeah.
So that's great. You've already said that the sports world has, obviously everything has changed. Is this change that's going to stay? What do we see for the future here for the sports world, but also for Bleacher Report?
I mean, I think it has to, right? Like, I was so encouraged last week when the MLB and NHL stood in solidarity with their sort of brethren at the NBA. I think we are at a reckoning moment, and I think that's a good thing. I think that what you can expect to see from us certainly is more diversity as far as how we're thinking about content. So you can expect to see more short and long form content coming out of our studio team. We're certainly interested in betting and how to do that in a way that is, non-threatening and sort of gamifies the experience. We are definitely focused on how to make the app product UX even more seamless. So earlier this year, we introduced a lot of social UI where we can follow each other and share messages, which sort of allows you to port all of the behaviors that you were doing on your mobile phone with your friends inside the app. It moves from being just a publishing platform to being a real platform where you can have an end-to-end experience with people that care about the same things you do. One of the other really exciting things around the app is the ability to have it more intelligently tailor content specific to your needs. So you sign onto the app and you log into sort of streams you want to follow, whether it's the NFL or a specific team. And over time, the app's content that it delivers to you becomes smarter and smarter, just based on the things you're interacting with and engaging with. So those are the things I'm sort of excited about. And especially when we're in this sort of fanless experience, if we can, as a brand, be the bridge or the conduit for the fan to have the experience that we want them to, even though they're not in the stadium, then that is our ultimate goal.
Awesome. We're very, very excited for October and you guys partnering with us on Clio Sports. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have great honoraries, great executive speaking. I know everything's coming out and being announced now. I'm so excited for it. But for you guys, what do you see, the future of marketing is? And I know you've already kind of, talking about branded content and stuff like that, but do you see a little bit more that you can kind of dive into for us?
Yeah, certainly so what was hard for us this year, because we'd established such a good foundation for it, was this idea of a unique consumer experience. So we had been moving into year 3 of NBA All-Star, year 3 of NBA Summer League. We had launched for the first time something called Be Our Gridiron House, which was a celebration of all things NFL around Super Bowl. So I think, as I mentioned, creating this sort of fan experience not in stadium, how do we do that virtually? I think from a marketing standpoint, one of the things that I'm excited about is, and I think you'll see an early test from us in Q4, is this idea of how do we create a virtual event that is exciting and has virality and sort of crowdsources people around either a sports calendar moment or an idea for people to come together. We've toyed around with sort of virtual drive-ins. We're thinking about, how do we, as an example, if we remain in this current situation for the next sort of 6 months, I know. What are the things that we can continue to experiment with? So another area that's worked, that we've been surprised about its success in some ways is our commerce division. So we have sort of a burgeoning e-commerce business that we worked really hard to secure relationships with not only the leagues, but the players associations, so that we can have really amazing new IP and create moments around, the return to the NBA was a great example, because we released a 22 creative collection for each of the teams that were going into the bubble. You'll continue to see more like that from us. Also, from a commerce perspective, we're able to use that platform as a way to also make change. So we did release a collection around Dwyane Wade's Social Change Fund, where 100% of the proceeds from the collection went to that. I think you'll see more initiatives from us, even in the back half of the year, that are completely pro-justice specific and benefit philanthropic causes only. But I think from those perspectives, we've barely scratched the surface, right? Like, what is the right calculus for a virtual event? And how do you create commerce or excitement around cultural moments that typically in season would be easy if somebody, switches teams or whatever it is? How do you do that now when nobody's actually attending the games and still get people to have as much excitement about it?
That's amazing. Well, thank you, Ed.
Thank you guys.
It's kind of amazing how the great pause in sports has created so many new opportunities, and it'll be exciting to see how you guys sort of handle that in the months ahead. So
I appreciate
your engagement. I caught you before, but I didn't have time to take a sip.
Thank you so much for the time and for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Have a good afternoon, guys.
You too.
Bye. That was awesome. I love the work it's just so great to see the work. So that was fun to see a winner from a couple of years ago too.
And we'll see if there's a football season this year.
Let's pray. Okay. Good to see you, Tim.
Good to see you, Nicole. And thank you guys for watching. For the latest in creativity every day, please visit musebyclio.com. And we're, of course, back here every Thursday with new episodes of On Brand. Thank you for watching.